Hey, welcome to the 167. Today in the 167, we're talking about fatherhood, forgiveness, and frijoles. Welcome to the 167. Hey, welcome back to the 167. I am here with the hot honey himself, Pastor Rick George.
Is that what this is, hot honey?
It looks like hot honey.
Well,
Context for audio listeners, his shirt
is yellow.
Oh, I thought that was my new nickname or something now, but it's the color of my shirt.
Color of his shirt.
Oh, I get it now. Yes.
That's what that's about. Absolutely.
Yes.
That's what I was referring to. All right. And with us is Johnny Cash, Jake Reeves.
Bienvenidos.
In black.
Bienvenidos indeed. And with you, as always, is Pastor Lucas Motley, discipleship pastor, podcaster extraordinaire.
Boom.
So this week, we are talking about our Father's Day message in our series, Dangerous Prayers. And so last week, we talked a little bit about that dangerous prayer of...
Last week?
Yeah.
What are you
God
asking me
use me,
last week
right?
for?
Well,
I
because
thought we were talking about this week.
last week I got it wrong about what the previous week was. So this
the
week,
first week was Make Me Dangerous.
Make Me Dangerous. And then this is...
God Use Me, week 2. Week 3 was God Help Me Be Forgiving or Help Me Forgive Others.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So one of the themes that carried through from the last week to I feel like this week kind of stacks on it was that idea of, you said, my greatest ability is my availability.
Correct.
So sometimes we talk ourselves out of doing something because we're like, well, I'm not skilled in that. But if you're available, God can use you. How do you feel like that translates to what we're talking about this week with fatherhood and Father's Day?
I think we've all listened to people, kind of navigated through some challenges of life with people, and have kind of heard the repetitious story about the absentee father. The dad that was never there to encourage, the dad that was just gone. Maybe he'd left, maybe there was a divorce, maybe just disinterested and checked out or whatever. And that causes a lot of wounds, a lot of questions that are created in children's lives when dad is just not there. So that is a challenge. On the flip side of that, for some dads, it's not because they're bad guys, and it's not because they're trying to harm their children. And I mentioned that in the message that, on behalf of dads, the wounds that are created a lot of the times are just inadvertent or they're unintended. And so there are dads who they believe they have this drive that I want to provide everything for my kids. I want to give them everything that this life can afford. But to do that, I have to work. I have to take a job that's going to cause me to travel. And in that travel, I make a lot of money. I'm a sales rep, I'm a whatever, and I'm making a lot of money. And I'm using that money to give my kids the things that I think that they really want. And for a little while, what I've heard and learned is for a short period, it's like, that's awesome. I got new stuff all the time. I had the latest of all the gaming systems, or I got this and that, and I turned 16 and I got a car and all. But as years go by, what you hear is I'd trade all of that if my dad was at home, just to be able to know him and for him to be available for me. So there is that, that tension there that, there's a void when you're absent, but it's not because you're a bad dad. It's because I thought I was giving them the things that mattered most, and it just wasn't.
So you can have an absentee father through lack of caring, through no fault, through divorce, through just, absent fatherhood, or you can actually have an absentee father through kind of over provision or
Yeah, and I've talked with guys. They're like, "No, I love my kids, man. I wish I could spend more time with them, but I can't because if I do, then I can't provide." And there's
It's a balance.
yeah, and there's probably all kinds of layers there of how much of it is really for them and how much of it is ego driven and how much of it is, just I want to be successful and giving my kids things are the byproduct of that, and they should just be grateful that they get all. I mean, so I don't think that there's any singular thing that's the answer, because it's not as simple as, well, just stay home all the time. Well, now we have no income or no provision, so it is it's a balancing act.
Well, and I think even in that, there's room for, hey, I came home, but I'm not really home. I'm still on my phone. I'm still answering calls, and I'm not really available. And because it's summertime, I don't know if you guys, relate to this, but I always think that this can be hyper focused at the pool. Like if you take your kids to the pool, it's, Daddy, look at me, watch what I can do.
Oh, yeah.
Like they want your focus. Like they want your time and they want your focus. And it's not just enough, hey, I took you to the pool. It's, Daddy, swim with me, Daddy, watch me, Daddy, catch me, Daddy,
Yeah, again, sometimes we just think, well, I was there, right? I went to the pool, but were you there?
I'm
present?
tired. I want to lay on a lawn chair.
Yeah, and so, yeah, I wish it was just as simple as saying, here's the box, check it, and you're good, but it's not. So,
well, and you referenced this week something, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's from Wild at Heart, right? When we talk about the father wound.
they do address the father wound, and John
lots
Eldridge.
of books. Yeah, lots of men's books talk about the father wound. John Eldridge wrote, I think that's the first time I encountered it, was Wild at Heart. And he talks about how most guys go through different stages of your life that are just universal. We talked a couple of weeks ago about the stage where you think that you can take your dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Because of the father wound, it's like, you heard me say, I'm going to take you. Come on.
I think I'm big enough. I can take you down. But there are just different things that are kind of universal to men. And no matter how good a father you are, no matter, like you said, no matter how hard you try, I think there are some things that we just leave with our kids. There are wounds. Hey, I didn't make it to your basketball game. I didn't, and so kids got to work through that. They got to come to a better understanding about, those kind of things. What are some examples that you have seen, whether in your own life or in the lives of people that we worked with that you think are either common father wounds or something that you've kind of seen people work through?
So absentee, like just not being there. We've already talked about that. The next one was it's probably unrealistic expectations. And so having these expectations that are so high and having the driven father that pushes you so hard that you can never please them. Everything, you just didn't do enough, no matter how hard you tried. You never heard the words, great job. That was awesome. It's always the negative, the critical, that you should be better. I don't know. Those are a couple of the big ones. I don't know if you guys have experienced any others.
And if you're watching on YouTube, you've gotten the full experience of Jake Reeves' presence. But for our audio listeners, do you want to weigh in on this?
What? No, it's fine.
Like you're really quiet today.
I'm literally taking it in. As I think about in my own life. So I had a dad. Can I? So
wait, what happened to Richard?
No. So I had a dad, and he actually, he's still here. He goes to church here. And my dad was great. So I grew up in a loving household. But I created my own version of kind of the hyper toxic one you're talking about, where never please. Like my dad he's very entrepreneurial. He's always, he was raised out in Western Kansas, where you got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And so he was always looking for ways to get better. Well, a lot of times what that would manifest in, and I remember this because unfortunately it is a core memory if you've ever seen the movie Inside Out.
Yeah.
So, and actually it's something that I went through my own, forgiving him because he didn't actually mean it as anything. But my 7th grade year, This is taking you back. So I'm the same height that I am right now.
Okay.
So I'm massive compared to all the other 7th graders. Our first 7th grade basketball game, our team scores 24 points. I score 20 of those points. And like, I'm not even registering that just happened. We still lost by 2 points.
Because you were like a man child back
I basically
then.
was. And so, unfortunately, that did not continue on. But I remember I got to the end of that, and we got out from that game, and because we lost, my dad, what he told me was, well, you could have probably boxed out more, and he was just trying to help me because the team we had lost. But I took it as, oh, well, nothing I really do
is ever enough.
and that kind of, and it's easy to manifest those things in our own life when it was never really intended. I've seen that, and then I know we had to walk through a lot with Sarah's family. She comes from kind of parents who were divorced, and she was at the age where she could choose which household she went to. Chose her mom's house. Thank goodness that's how I met her. They moved into our town. Yeah. But her dad, up until, he may still for all I know, but at least until her 20s, was still holding onto a grudge from when she was 12 years old, and basically removed himself from her life. And
because she chose
the mom. And so Sarah had to really work through stuff on that. And again, hey, I'm just throwing, my dad stepped a lot into that. And I joke that my dad loves my wife more than he loves me because they're nicer. And
I was going to say, we all love your wife more.
I know. I'm very well aware of this. It's why, never mind.
That's not true. Like you and I, we have Wendy's together.
It's true. Like you have been with me as I experienced the frigidness of Wendy's, the Mountain Dew at Buffalo Wild Wings.
I'm there for you to get sick of. So, no, I think these are all really common things, but I resonate with that, where it's like there are just really complex relationships where, like for my own kids, I know that I am, like I said, we were joking before that. I was just like, oh yeah, there's times where like my daughter will say like something, and it's like something really piddly. I'm just like, man, tell it to your therapist in 20 years. I'm just like, because I know that I'm going to mess up and I'm going to hurt her in some way. It's going to be that. It's going to be a basketball game. I'll go to 20 basketball games. It's not the right one. So there's going to be that hurt. But on top of that, 2 of my girls we adopted through foster care. And so every Father's Day it's a very tense situation because, their father was abusive. He was a drug addict. Their case began in drug court. And then immediately he was removed from the situation. So the 3 years they're in foster care, I think they saw their dad one time, and it was a fluke. And so they haven't seen their dad in 7-8 years. And so for them there is they can either idealize him or villainize him or whatever, and it's like I wouldn't even know how to get in touch with them anymore. But so they've got all those wounds from their biological father, and I'm like, well, now I have to live up to some other. It probably would be similar to a divorce family where it's like now I'm stepping into that role, and not only are we battling with what the unforgiveness that they have for him, but I'm also probably ticking them off, and like they're creating more and more baggage.
Yep. Yeah, and it's it is a challenge for parents in general, but maybe a little more so for fathers. We tend to be a little less in tune with emotions, a little less in tune with, what's happening in life. And, there are times that just in general, dads, miss cues. Like we don't notice the thing and so we don't say what we should say, or we don't do the thing that, we should have done or needed to do. And it wasn't because we're bad. It's not because we didn't care. It's a little bit oblivious. It's just not, part of our wiring or our makeup. And again, I guess I am kind of making excuses, but, I'm just trying to bring some context that, sometimes, as men, we start to beat ourselves up like we're a horrible dad. And it really, you're not a horrible dad. You just, messed up. You missed something that you should have noticed, or you should have said something when you didn't. And and that's where inadvertently you created a wound. It wasn't like you took out the knife and I was opening the knife and you got cut, and I'm sorry. I didn't intend to do that.
Well, and I want to talk about Ephesians 4 really quick, and then I want to come back to a little bit what you're saying, because I think it's really key to what we're talking about here is, this is one of the verses that you were talking about today. It's, let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice. Be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another as God in Christ forgave you. Right. And that's what we're talking about, is healing these wounds, healing unforgiveness. It doesn't have to be with your father. It could be with anybody. But what do you see in this verse that are kind of the mechanics of how do I get past, this hurt? It says, let all bitterness and wrath and anger, clamor, slander be put away from you. Great. How do I do that?
Yeah. So let's kind of backtrack a little bit and get a little firmer grip on those things that he mentioned. Mm-hmm. So there's a direct correlation, bitterness, unforgiveness, or bitterness and hurt. Mm-hmm. Right. So if you don't forgive, that anger, wrath, all those things, slander, you start talking bad about the other person. All of those things, can be directly tied back to a hurt that you experienced and forgiveness was not extended. And so, just in a very practical way, what we're hearing here is, all of those feelings, those emotions, bitterness, rage, anger, slandering, get rid of that, and instead be tenderhearted, right? Be a little more full of mercy and compassion, and try to understand maybe what was happening, and then forgive. So the practical aspect is, instead of immediately being so full of anger and bitterness and hatred and just spewing all this stuff, take a moment and say, I want to put all that aside. And as much as I can, I want to try to put myself in that other person, my dad, my friend, whoever it was that hurt you. So I want to put myself in their position, and, what do I know about them? And, what would have been going on in life during that time? And is there anything that, that would help me extend grace to them? Mm-hmm. And again, that's when it starts to really rub us the wrong way and say, well, that's not fair, right? So we talked about that as well. But it's just taking a moment to say, I don't want to be bitter. Yeah. And so I want to. There are other parts of the Bible where it says, love hopes all things, believes all things. So what is it that I can believe about my dad that is true, that gives me hope? And again, not to negate the fact that there are dads that were just jerks. They are absolutely off the rails, and they hurt you deeply, and they didn't really care. Right. So that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah, it escalates from, those imagined expectations to my dad was sexually abusing me. Or
right.
Sure.
Those are going to be things that, but even in that sense, I think, when you're asking that question, how do I forgive that? I think you have the recipe here when you're saying, it says, be kind to one another and tenderhearted. Yeah. And it's like, people are like, well, I can't be tenderhearted because I'm angry. And it's like, no. You can absolutely make that choice, because that's the only way you get past it. I feel like, where, like I said, that again, to talk about my girls, it's like, we really disliked their parents, because of what they did. And I told Chris that was a transformative moment for me, where I really didn't like their mom. And then I met their mom's mom, and I was like, oh, you are a product of, this household, and you think that you're operating like gangbusters. You think that you're really firing on all cylinders here because this is the way your mom raised you. Yeah. I see now, this is not entirely your fault.
There's a story behind every fate. Like, every person has a story.
Somebody really wise.
I know. And so, it all ties together. And but what's important, I think, to remember kind of in this conversation of, what's the formula, kind of, how do we move from bitterness to forgiveness and to move on, and then to remember without the pain, right? How do we get there? Well, you follow Scripture and you do what we've been talking about, but also keeping in mind that does not mean that that person who hurt you has to have the same place back in your life as they did previously. That's not what forgiveness means either. So in an abusive situation, let's say you were sexually abused and you've processed through, and I'm getting rid of the anger and all of the slander, and I'm going to extend forgiveness to them. It does not mean that, okay, well, now you get to come over to the house and no, that doesn't mean that at all. Right. It doesn't mean like in your situation, that, hey, guess what? We went through this process of forgiving your father, so surprise, here he is on Father's Day. It's like, right. No, that's not what we're saying.
We let him adopt you back.
Yeah. It's like, no, that is not what it means. There are still some consequences for actions, and there are things that we need to have in place as protective measures. That's why we have wisdom. It's not just, you hurt me, I forgive you, now you're back in my life to hurt me again. No, let's put some boundaries, some safeguards, and it doesn't mean I haven't forgiven you. It just means that, I need to protect myself. And those safeguards might come down a little at a time, but.
So, Jake, when you're thinking about like that situation where it's kind of like an unmet expectation thing, like what do you think was, like you obviously have a better understanding of it now, like we're all kind of going, oh yeah, we're going to mess up. Like we have a better, was it when you had kids, or what was the aha secret sauce kind of moment where you're like, oh, that's when I realized, oh, my dad's human?
Time. Yeah. It really, and that's the great thing about being available continually in your relationships. We'll go beyond even fatherhood. Is there's a chance for character to be established, and then all of a sudden when you've got that lie up in your head that says, they meant this with malice. They meant this to make that cut at you on purpose. Then all of a sudden you're like, no, wait a second. I know, everything they did for me, and like in my own life, I made so many, they were really gracious with me, and I made a lot of stupid decisions, and they let me make those stupid decisions. So that way, because they figured out that I was the type that the tighter they held me, the tighter I'd
the harder you fought. Yeah.
And so they did that, and they loved me through that, and I'm like, okay, then I know even these foibles, these, words that were said, it might have even been a bad day or something, where if they could go back, they'd be like, yeah, I wouldn't say that again. And so then it's just kind of that, the Holy Spirit rewriting that story in your head and actively forgiving. That's the big thing I see in that Ephesians is all those verbs are like active verbs. Yeah. They're, you're getting rid of, you're not saying, well, I'm ready for forgiveness if it comes to the table. Yeah.
Right.
Like it's actually,
forgiveness has taken me.
I am going to choose to engage in kindness. I'm going to choose to offer forgiveness here. And
it's that moment where someone is rude to you and you bite your tongue and you grit your teeth and you're like, tell me more about that. Like, I'm sorry if I hurt your feet.
Oh yeah.
It's that I'm purposefully being polite or kind or,
Yeah, and the whole, so Trudy and I had conversations over, after the sermon, over the text and kind of what was said and just about the whole idea of forgiveness. And one of the things that we talked about, being in ministry, I don't know if you guys have ever experienced this or not.
Am I in ministry? Okay.
As the senior pastor, there have been people who have hurt us. We've
What?
trusted. No,
What?
I know. Have you? You've experienced that too?
Everyone doesn't love you?
No.
And
Don't look
is
at
kind
me.
to you at all
And
times?
so
I'm
we've,
invincible.
so we've had people say things about us and hurt us, and we know, what they've said. Sometimes they've said it, kind of in our presence. Sometimes just come back to us or whatever. Yeah. And so anyway, and then you see people, a year, 2 years later, out and about somewhere, and then what is your response supposed to be?
Just boop them on the nose.
Yeah, it's like, oh, it's so Great to see you. How
Yeah.
you doing, man? How's
Man,
life?
I haven't seen you since you posted about me on Facebook.
Yeah, do you
Oh, glory.
Yeah, are you supposed to just pretend like it never happened? Like you said,
That's what I'm
On your
saying, man.
nose.
They won't even know how to react if you boop them on the nose.
or do you say, what? Like, I don't know. You hurt me. I have no feelings right now. I don't know. Like how you.
I think
how-
you go the opposite way and be like, "What? You don't go to our church anymore? I didn't even notice."
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
dagger.
And so
The stuff that goes on in our brains that we never actually.
Right. So going back to what in the very beginning of the message, when I said forgiveness, although it seems to be, fairly straightforward and simplistic, it is very complex because it is so multifaceted. And every one of us has been wounded, but we've all been wounded in a slightly different way from different people. And so the process of forgiveness, though the process is the same, the emotions and the way we navigate through that are very, very different. Okay. And so just to conclude, going back what you said, it is a very active process. So as someone who has been hurt, I have to actively forgive that other person, to get rid of those things that are holding me back and forgive them. As someone who has hurt another person, I have to be active in apologizing and saying, I am sorry, I was wrong, would you please forgive me? And it's an active process, not, well, if it happens to come around, then maybe I would consider, offering. No, I need to be pursuing that.
So, being active, Jake, what do you want to say? Last thing of if people are stuck and they can't find freedom yet, be active about it.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, you need to actually take that step. And if you don't have the strength to forgive or do whatever, then you need to be in a community or some people that can encourage you to do that. Because a lot of times we will hold back forgiveness until someone hears our story and they're like, maybe you should forgive that person. And you kind of like stare at them with death eyes and you're like, how dare you? You don't live my life. I deserve every bit of this. And then it starts to kind of wash over you.
Yep.
And so I think you do that, which I'm going to roll this for, the shameless plug that it is, New Life Freedom coming
Life
out.
Yep.
Tuesdays, 6:30.
Like a very easy, tangible thing here at New Life, but then, in your own life.
Absolutely.
Yep. We're going to wrap up. I would say I'm going to quote for that last part of it. In the year of our Lord 2022, a very wise Jake Reeves said about rewriting the story that's being told. So I think you have to do that in your brain. Is you have to rewrite and say, my dad didn't do that to me. I'm going to rewrite that and say it wasn't his fault and he messed that up. I think you have to actively do that.
Getting a plaque that says that now with my own name on it.
In the year of our Lord 2022, Jake Reeves quoted. Thanks for joining us here on the 167. If you are having problems finding freedom, you can come and join us at New Life Freedom Tuesday nights at 6:30 at the Kids World Building. And we will see you next time. Stay tuned for a 7-minute story about freedom.
Yes.
See you guys next time. Hey, welcome back to 7-Minute Stories. And tonight we're going to start at the very beginning, aren't we?
Yes.
It's a very good place to start. So you want to introduce yourself to everybody?
Sure. My name is Pam Balcom, elderly, coming up on being a senior.
Stop.
Yes. Let's see where to start. Beginning. Grew up in a broken home. Loving family, friends, but it was a broken home. All of my parents, my step-parents, looking back, just doing the best that they could for us. I was subject to abuse by a close family member. It progressed for several years. What's funny when I look back is I don't think I was ever angry or upset with anybody but myself, which maybe it's normal, but I didn't think about it in any other way other than something's wrong with me. I've done something wrong, or I've progressed somewhere. From there, when I finally started to speak out about it, there was that instant where there's that doubt.
Mm-hmm.
I was rebellious, acting out, wanting attention. And it's not so much looking back at doubt for me, but it was a fact of, it's really hard to believe. It's really hard to see that something like that happened under somebody's nose for so long. And they have their guilt and their denial. And I took responsibility for that too. Like, it's my fault that they feel bad now, or it's my fault that they're angry. And just kind of that sits on a slow boil. So I'm a bad kid. Just, once again, something wrong with me. And the people around me are now unhappy. They're struggling to deal, and that's my fault because I'm not helping them deal with that. So things it's just the stress and the tension and trying, and I just ran away. I can't be in this home. I can't be in this environment, and I'm going to run away. And we look back and we laugh now because I was a horrible delinquent because I ran away from home, but I stayed in school. I still went to school every day. I didn't.
Worst runaway ever.
I was the worst runaway ever. And my mom, bless her heart, because she never knew where I was at or where I was staying. I refused to say. And I think she knew if she showed up at school and she forced me to come home, I'm just going to run away again. Mm. But I went to school every stinking day. I kept up my grades. I wasn't gonna fail. I wanted drugs and alcohol. I really, really wanted drugs and alcohol. I saw people around me that could forget. They would just, and to me, it looked like that was peace. And I wanted that. I wanted the thoughts out of my head. I wanted to stop thinking. And I was horrible at that too. I couldn't bring myself to do it. And I thank God for that, because I think he was on my heart and he was saying, you can act out and you can do these things, but you will not do that. You just, I won't allow it. You won't. And there was a fear every time the opportunity presented itself and I could do it. There was just this fear, and I couldn't take that step. I couldn't go down that. And a lot of times I thought it was a case of, if I did that, then I would be out of control and I wouldn't have that control over myself. And I would think I'm doing one thing and finding out later that I was doing something else. So I fooled myself and thought, I'm in control. I'm the boss of me. I'm going to make my own decisions, and I'm going to decide who I relate to and how I relate to them, and put my big girl pants on and just do what I wanted to do. I graduated at 17 after therapy and working things out with my family, moving back home. Mom pretty much had said, you're here, this is my home, these are my rules, and if you don't like it, you can move out, but you're either going to be 18 or graduate first. And I went, fine, I'll graduate. And I doubled down on everything and graduated early. And she was horrified to come home. She's like, what are you doing? And I was like, I have a roommate, have an apartment, moving out. I do my own thing. I have a job. And again, responsible, but
rebellion through responsibility.
Right. And doing all of those things as an adult that I, thought I was supposed to do. Sorry. Looking back, poor relationships. By me just denying my path in life and what God wanted for me, and thinking that I'm making my choices, I made horrible choices. I put myself in situations where I'm being used all over again. I'm being abused all over again. And not seeing it, I'm like, why didn't this one work out? Okay, well, let's go on to this one. Well, this one doesn't work out either. And it wasn't until I ended up pregnant. and then got married. Had feelings that this maybe isn't where I want to be, but I did it anyway. It wasn't a year goes by, and like this is one of the worst relationships I've ever been in. This is horrible. And we decided we're just going to go our separate ways. This isn't working. And I was crushed because I go from being a bad kid to being a bad runaway to being a bad wife. And I'm failing every single step of the way. I'm failing. And the next fear was, I'm going to be a bad mom. And I couldn't fail there. I'm not going to fail there. And I struggled and I prayed, and I just couldn't understand why, if I had a good heart and I wanted the best for people around me, why wasn't it working out? Why was nothing working out? And I wrote it down because it's been a long, long time since I went back to this verse. And I found it by accident. I was just sitting with my son, feeling sorry for myself, and I came across Ephesians 4, where it said, get rid of all bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice. And at the time, I didn't think I was bitter or angry. I was living my life. I was doing the things I wanted to do. And sitting in the dark thinking about it, I'm like, you're a bitter person. And I found myself getting, was turning into this cold, hard shell, where I thought I had relationships, I thought I had friends, but looking back, I didn't have those things. And I finally just broke down and said, okay, I give up. What do you want me to do? And I'll do it. And I forgave the people in the past that had hurt me. I forgave my ex-husband, who was in the process of trying to make my life miserable. And just let it go. And there's a peace with that I'm not carrying this anchor. I don't have this shadow following me everywhere I go, just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, because I'm hanging on to grudges that I really didn't realize I was hanging on to.
So tell me a little bit more about that. You were talking about you just finally let it go, you forgave. What was that for you? Like, was it replacing a truth with a lie? Was it changing the way that you saw somebody? What was that piece for you?
The piece for me was just realizing that I was carrying a burden that wasn't mine to carry. And if I could let that go and realize that my bad decisions then are forgiven, that my poor choices are forgiven, and I could stop punishing myself, and in lieu of that, punishing those around me. What I found when I did that, and was just, it was freeing, and I was, you're not just overjoyed happy, but I was happy. And I then had to re-explain myself to friends and family that they weren't ready to let go. They weren't ready to stop being angry on my behalf. And it was almost like my forgiving those people that hurt me and did things to me. Now I'm betraying them because I'm not punishing, and I'm not still angry, and I'm not still bitter. And they weren't ready to let go of that.
What an incredible thing, though. And just a couple of things that you said. One was that when you're doing that to yourself, you end up directing that towards other people. And that is so true, and we end up creating our toxic environments. But what you're saying there is that sometimes when you have freedom of that, when you get freedom from guilt and shame, and so some people, they don't
want to.
Yeah, they don't want to get free, but they also don't want you to be free. They want to drag you back into that because it somehow puts condemnation on them.
Yes. And to explain and people, well, how can you forgive? You know, knowing the details and knowing what life was like. That doesn't make any sense. How can you let go of that? And how can you be happy letting go of that?
And I'm going to be bitter on your behalf.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they think that they're standing up for you and they're defending you, but they just make it difficult. And to explain it, no, Jesus has said, this is what he has said. And by me doing this, I become a better person. I am living the life that I was supposed to live. And I'm right where I'm supposed to be. And I'm happy being there. And there's things that, would I change decisions? Oh, every day. Would I change things that happen? Absolutely. But some of those things help me be who I am. And they help me relate to other people and other things. And I laugh because in doing that, God put a man in my life that scared the dickens out of me. He was the complete opposite of anything I'd ever had in my life. And I felt, and it made me feel, and it scared me to death. And I just, no, this is almost like a too good to be true thing. And he was a man who loved God, and he loved his mom in that order. And
I don't deserve that.
And I don't deserve that.
Yeah.
And he loved me, and he loved my son. And he's like, this is where we're going. And he laid it all out, whether I wanted it, this is, where we're going. And it went from that he loved God to he loved me, to he loved my son, to he loved his mom. And he walks that with me every day. And I was doing the math the other day, it's coming up, and this month will be 33 years that we have been married. And when I look at the fact that we gave our children a home, and a complete home, and without God and without that foundation, and without that, I don't think that we would have ever accomplished that. And it's not to say that life is perfect, because it's certainly not. And I don't think that God ever promised me that it would be easy. And sometimes, honestly, it's not. But he laid out for me where I needed to go and the path I needed to take. And by just almost not only say giving up, but just giving in and say, okay, this is your will, and I'm done fighting, and I'm done running away, and I'm going to do what you need me to do. And I don't regret that ever. I have managed to rebuild those relationships and have memories that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And to also bring those people to see if Jesus can bring this kind of peace in my life and this kind of forgiveness, and that I can do that and go on. And there's no pretending that things didn't happen, because they did, and that's life. But I don't have that weight. I truly don't have that weight. And I'm thankful for that, above all, that I don't.
Well, I feel like that's what the definition of when we talk about redemption is, that where it's like not only are we cleansed, but we become curse breakers for our children. We leave things better. It's like, like you said, you went from I grew up in a broken home to we provided our kids a full and stable
home.
Yeah.
And I don't even really think about it like that either, is that I didn't fail at everything. I just failed until I realized that I wasn't in the control that I thought I was in. That I'm not the boss of me, basically.
Yeah.
God's the boss of me, and he's gonna give you that rope to make those decisions. But in the end, you need to realize that you need to come back to where you belong.
Well, I love your story, and thank you for being so transparent and coming in and sharing it.
I appreciate you giving me the opportunity. I
love
really
it.
do.
I think it's going to encourage people, and like I said, I love hearing those stories where this is what God has brought me from, and where God gets a hold of you, and Jesus just radically changes your life, and all of those things that you get to feel worthy, you get to change your identity of who you are.
Yes, Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you for coming in, Pam. We'll see you guys here next time on 7 Minute Stories. If you enjoyed this episode of the 167, make sure you like, subscribe, follow, get notified, leave a 5-star rating and a positive review. Tell all your friends to listen as well. Make sure you go over to newlifegardener.com and check out all that we have to offer as a church, and check out our messages online as well. Thanks for listening.